Okay, second attempt at recording this because, as always, I got interrupted by a phone call. Okay, so, Night Parade. Let's address some points. Again, I'm not looking, you don't know what I said the first time. Not looking at Discord right now. So, one of the main points was, using failure there was 100% a way to hook Ryan in and force this combat encounter, or at least force Ryan to engage with it and not want to leave. Like as Allison said, no way to get Ryan not to do that combat encounter, not to fight that guy without physically tearing her out of there. And that would probably cause such a rift that the party would break down. You know, I don't see a way to smooth that over. You know, the way Ryan is already not very, I don't know, maybe Ohm could do it, but I don't know. We would see. Or, well, we won't see, rather. And then addressing, like, okay, originally you thought this guy might come out, threaten the party a little bit, talk some stuff, and then set up to fight him later. We have so many of those in this game. There's so many NPCs and enemies that have shown up. We've talked to them a little bit. They threaten us and then run away. Like, there's so many of those. We haven't killed a single one. And to me, that's a big factor why, like, no, we're just fighting this guy. I don't give a shit anymore. Because it's like, not that, like, that hurts. What does it hurt? I don't want to say it hurts my investment, but it colors what Sendlier is going to be doing in the game. Like this entire campaign, it's always been like, oh, here's this really powerful dude. Here he is. Bye. And like we haven't, like the only one we've really gotten to kill was like Strahd, and he's back too now. So like, it doesn't even really matter. We killed that hag that one time. So I think outside of this particular encounter, that's been a problem in this campaign. We haven't gotten to kill any antagonists. Like, any antagonists that should be killed, we haven't gotten a chance to kill them. And I think that's important to do here and there for the party. Like, I've only, in Site 27, I did that with Welgren. And I think it was the second mission. Most of the group that's going to watch this video wasn't there for that mission. But at the same time, there was a Karcist that the party killed, and then Welgren stood up out of that guy's corpse and like, hey guys, thanks for that, see ya. So, like, and this was just a totally new guy, and they're like, oh, what the fuck? So that was still, the party got the satisfaction of killing this antagonist and then set up a new antagonist for later. But pretty much anywhere else, I try not to do that where an antagonist runs away. Because also another philosophy that I've kind of been thinking about, like when I was first running Site 27, it was like, oh, set up a long-term antagonist for the future. And how long is that going to take? Especially now in this like rotating spotlight format, how long is it going to take to get to any given antagonist? Like, no, just do the cool shit now. That's kind of how I feel about a lot of it. Like, let's just do it now. So the fact we haven't gotten a chance to kill, let alone even fight, a lot of big antagonists in Night Parade was a big factor for me. It's like, no, we're just fighting this guy. I don't care anymore. Then, as far as like, you know, trying to work more vulnerabilities into enemies, like more strategy and stuff, like that's a good thing. I love that. But when that hasn't been a factor this whole campaign, and it hasn't been a factor in like any of the other games Chief has been running, there's no reason for us to suddenly try to investigate vulnerabilities. I think I said this last night, that like it was very difficult to read this thing at all. You know, we're not gonna just like, oh, let's figure out its vulnerabilities. It's not gonna. It's like, oh, we just can't like read this thing, so I'm not even gonna try. I'm gonna do other things. I'm gonna put my focus elsewhere. But like, what was it? Like, this is another factor. Like, relying on players to remember they have a specific ability, especially if it's an ability they don't often use, or it's just kind of like an extra thing that their character happens to have. Not a great strategy for having information, you know? Like, for Site 20, again, anecdotal, my experience. For Site 27, I had, what do you call it? I design a lot of my monsters with vulnerabilities in mind, and they're often vulnerabilities that the players have access to, because not every character is going to have access to like every damage type. Like, in the first mission, the like bulk of the enemies that they were going to fight had a vulnerability to lightning damage, and Gersh, one of the characters, he has his main melee weapon did a small amount of lightning damage. And there's two things I do with vulnerabilities. One, instead of doing double damage, I give extra dice. So you're rewarded for having at least a little bit of, quote, elemental damage. And having a big amount of elemental damage isn't going to like break an encounter. Where, like, you know, if there's an enemy that's vulnerable to fire damage, a fireball just kills them a lot of the time, or just takes out so much of their life it doesn't matter. And then also, a lot of the enemies, if they have a vulnerability, something else happens. Like, those enemies that were vulnerable to lightning damage, it would seize up the hinges and metal parts on their body for a narrative explanation. So they would, like, I can't remember if they lost an attack or got stunned or whatever it was, but there was something tactical that you would get rewarded with, not just extra damage. Not that extra damage is meaningless, but otherwise, moving on. I think keeping this campaign going isn't a bad idea. But for me, like, I feel like I've explored a lot with Senlir, and I always like to dig down as far as we can. But so much has happened, and so much has, like, there's been so much bullshit happening to him. I say bullshit, I don't mean that in a negative way. But, like, you know, actually, for me, like, Sandler losing his sense of touch was a big disconnecting factor in a lot of ways. It's like, because his physical pain and his ability to resist it was kind of a draw of playing the barbarian type character. Whereas now, that's not a factor. Like the character that was probably the most able to resist pain no longer has to deal with pain. It's kind of not... It's not the most interesting wrinkle, you know? So, killing this guy, potentially getting his sense of touch back, that was also another draw for Sendler to fight this guy right now. So, you know, if we continue with this exact party and try to bring back versions of these characters, I'm going to be changing them up a lot. Like, I like the Scythe, it's great, but I'm probably going to do something different. Like, the thing that immediately jumps to mind, like I said last night, is bringing back the version of Dragon Senlir. Because one, that's the version that Copper first met. And two, here's a less impactful wrinkle. We learned that this guy was vulnerable to cold damage. Dragon Senlir has access to cold damage, so that's sticking in Sandler's consciousness, maybe. So I think there's an angle and some justification to bring back the draconic version of Sandler. And we'd have to rework the scythe into something else, maybe rework the artifact itself into the mask that Sandler wears. And maybe it stays a necklace instead. And then it could obviously probably do a little less empowering of Sandler's physical strikes, because I think he also gets cold damage on some stuff. But if, his claws and his bite, maybe rework it into that draconic rend we talked about before, and maybe now his attacks could do however this would get worked out. Maybe he doesn't necessarily get the dragon mask back, because that's a big power boost. The dragon mask is really powerful. He doesn't need that specifically. But maybe a version of some of those features baked into the draconic transformation. One, get rid of the claw and the bite and the rules there. Just give him a draconic rend. Maybe he can make an extra attack with the claws. Or maybe keep the bite and the claws. But if he makes at least one claw attack, he can make a second claw attack as part of the same attack action. That way he'd make bite, claw, claw, something like that. The bite does a big chunk of cold damage. The claws do smaller bits of cold damage. And he gets some extra radiant necrotic damage from the last rest in one way or the other. It wouldn't be 4d6 total anymore. Maybe it would be 44. Maybe it would just be 2d6, 1d6 of each damage type, something like that. I don't know. Or maybe it would be 2d6 and he could switch the damage type once. I don't know. There's ways to work that out, but that's an idea. But maybe I still want to keep that more bestial kind of barbarian for a whole different character, because that murder bug that I made a while ago, that does have some interesting possibility to his personality and character, and maybe I wouldn't want to retread that ground. But I don't know. There's ideas, there's options there. But moving on to a new campaign is also a decent idea. And then maybe revisit these characters as an epilogue later on. Because we're always kind of amped for a new campaign, and obviously I don't want to mess with Chiefs' Monday night paid game at all. I still want to continue that, but because I also, I want to make sure that Chief is excited to run this game. And I don't know if he's going to be as excited about continuing for these characters and what the hell's going on, but I don't know. Those are some of the thoughts I've had so far. Overall, this encounter was something I wanted to touch on is the idea of the realistic world as a main tenet or a main focus of the game. This was something Mitch does to a fault, and that was one of the problems with his games, that he's running everything as realistic and if X then Y, if this happens then this would happen, with the cohesion of the campaign and it being run as a game, and the players' fun and the DM's fun as kind of a back seat, which I don't know exactly what's going on in say Mitch's mind, but probably the more realistic aspect of that and trying to keep everything and shooting for that kind of goal is probably what's fun for Mitch. And this is also something I think happens with I know in Chief's case, he comes from playing 2nd edition, and that was one of the main things of 2nd edition, so that's where he picked that up. I don't know exactly where Mitch picked it up, but because there was a lot of stuff that would happen in Mitch's games where it was just kind of, instead of, okay, here's an example. There was a session where I said that I either wasn't going to be able to make it or I was going to be late. I can't remember. And then my schedule changed, first, before I get to that, I wasn't going to be able to make it. So he's like, okay, well, your character stays back at the tavern, and he'll catch up later. If you join late, you can play this gnome that happens to be there. And then it turns out my schedule changed, and I could be at the session on time. Well, he kept my character back at the tavern, even though, like, at the end of that session, the party had, like, literally just left. The start of the session was going to be them walking down the road and getting into an encounter. Or maybe it was like they did walk down the road and got into the encounter, and that's where the session ended. And, like, if I was the DM of that game, what I would have done is, like, okay, because now you can suddenly make it, we'll have your character on their way. Like, you realize, like, whatever it was that kept him back at the tavern no longer applies, and he left a short time later, and he's catching up. And then, like, you know, if you need to delay it slightly, he gets into initiative in, like, round 2 or 3, something like that. Instead, I sat there that whole session and did nothing. He didn't even remember that I was going to run the gnome. And I didn't want to interrupt. I didn't want to cause any flow, so I just kind of sat there the whole session. And that was not good. That was, like, you know, I can deal with that, but that's not a good way to run a game. Like accidentally or intentionally keeping a player out of a combat encounter and just sitting there doing nothing. There's sometimes you got to bend the rules a little bit so that players can play the game. You know what I mean? That doesn't apply as much to Night Parade's TPK, but you know, these things are factors. Like, what's going to be an interesting encounter? What's going to be fun for everybody involved? Like, you know, there's a lot of factors there, and I'm sure, and I'm going to have more thoughts that I can't fit in this video because I'm going to think of them as soon as I hit stop recording. But, you know, these are delicate things. They're an art, balancing these types of things and figuring out what the best way to do anything is. And because they're an art, that's why I like to give these kind of critique videos. It's not malicious, and it's not out of, you know, being salty or anything like that. Because I'm not mad about it, you know? I like the idea of either moving on from the game or continuing the game in this new weird way, and, like, you know, revising and remixing these characters in some way so they can come back. But it's like a big thing, like, just want to revisit that, like, a big thing that's been happening for this campaign, and especially in this particular fight. It was this big guy that we can't kill was dangled in front of our face, and then as we were dying, it was taunting us, saying, "Oh, you guys aren't strong enough." Like, consistently since after the spotlights, we came back from the spotlights, and during the spotlights, that made sense to be in, like, a bad position. But since we came back from the spotlights, I haven't really felt that our party was powerful at all. You know what I mean? Because we just keep running into things that are just stronger than we are. Not a whole lot has really been not a lot of, like I said before, not a lot of wins. Even if it's something like, I don't know, like, I think I kept making jokes about, like, a bandit party attacks us and we can just wipe them out. Something like that, I think, could have gone a long way to grounding us and reminding us how powerful this party is. Because, like, you know, we can look at our stats, but at the end of the day, I feel like stats and stuff and features are kind of arbitrary. They only exist in relation to everything else. Like having a big high number by itself in a vacuum on the page doesn't really matter. It matters what other numbers that number's being matched up against. So that's all I got for you today. I'm gonna have some more thoughts. Again, not salty. You know, this isn't that kind of critique. It's DMing and balancing encounters and all these things. They're an art form. You know, it's important to always try to be better at it, but keep the knowledge that it's never going to be perfect. It's impossible. So, GG's. That's what I got for you today.